The Switch. Chapter 1. "Hi, Whiskers," Carlos Santiago said, holding the enormous cat up with both hands like she was a sacred artifact with claws. "You are truly a specimen of squeezable joy and weaponized cuteness." Whiskers, pure as a gentle little giant and roughly the size of a decorative throw pillow with a pinion, stared back at him. Carlo lifted her a little higher and announced, "Behold, the scourge of the universe." Whiskers purred at first, soft and royal. Then, apparently deciding that being worshipped had become boring, she delivered 3 rapid patty taps directly to Carlo's face. "Ow! You fluffy little tyrant! What did I do to you?" Carlo said, blinking through the betrayal. They were in Carlo's personal quarters aboard the scientific vessel Event Horizon, a starship so massive, 3.4 kilometers long and 2.5 kilometers wide, that it could probably misplace a small moon in one of its maintenance bays. Outside the viewport, stars streamed past as the ship carried its science team toward a newly discovered planet for a colonial survey. The ship had only a minimal defense system because apparently someone in command believed optimism counted as armor. Carlo set Whiskers down before she could promote herself from scourge to active disaster. "All right, Whiskers, it's getting late. How about I make dinner for both of us?" He glanced at the wall display. 8 p.m. Earth time, in case your royal schedule requires documentation." Whiskers purred against Carlo's right leg and rubbed her whole body along him as she walked by, which Carlo chose to interpret as agreement, and not, as experience suggested, a warning. 25 minutes later, dinner was ready. Carlo sat in his bolted chair, because on a starship even furniture needed trust issues, and Whiskers hopped onto the kitchen table with the confidence of someone who had never once respected a rule. They began eating. For a few blessed seconds, peace existed. "You know, Whiskers," Carlo said, gazing out at the passing stars, "sometimes I wonder how you see the universe through your eyes." Whiskers did not understand a single word. She did, however, understand that her dinner bowl was on a raised surface, and therefore legally required to be tested by gravity. One paw touched the bowl. Carlo froze. "Don't you dare, Whiskers!" Whiskers looked him dead in the eye with the flat, ancient expression of a creature who had personally watched civilizations rise and decided all of them deserved less table space. Then she pushed the bowl off the table. It hit the floor with a tragic metallic clatter. Carlo stared at the mess, then at Whiskers, then back at the mess, as if hoping the universe might reconsider. "You big little jerk," he said with a disappointed sigh. "Now I have to clean up your royal disaster." Whiskers sat proudly beside the crime scene, purring like a tiny engine powered by chaos. Carlo reached for a cleaning cloth and muttered, "You know what? I don't think I want to know how you see reality. I'm pretty sure reality has filed several complaints." Chapter 2. Carlo cleaned up Whiskers' royal disaster with the slow, haunted movements of a man who had just lost a formal debate to a food bowl. Once the last splatter was gone, he decided the only civilized response was an hour-long bath, a clean shave, and enough underarm deodorant to convince tomorrow's co-workers that he had not spent the evening losing a war to poultry-flavored paste. In the bathroom, Carlo groomed himself with the solemn focus of a man preparing for battle, even though the battle was mostly with stubble and one suspiciously rebellious eyebrow. He tapped the mirror, and the glass lit up with a soft blue glow because mirrors in the future were apparently required to behave like they had gone to etiquette school. "Good evening, Mr. Santiago," an artificial voice said with the calm politeness of a machine that had never spilled cat food on its socks. "May I assist you with anything?" "Yes," Carlo said, pointing at the mirror like he was issuing orders to the galaxy's shiniest butler. "Pull up a 21st century archive track from 1500 years ago. Song title, Hillbilly Wooble Rap." He paused. "And don't judge me. History already did that." "Music selected, now playing," the AI announced, in the exact tone one might use to confirm a medical diagnosis. "Thank you," Carlo said, because Carlo believed manners mattered even when speaking to a mirror with the emotional warmth of a tax form. Then the beat dropped. Carlo began dancing in the bathroom with terrifying commitment, half space explorer, half caffeinated scarecrow, fully convinced that banjos and bass had once united ancient Earth. 20 minutes later, he emerged fresh, clean, and spiritually confused by whatever dance move he had invented near the towel rack. He put on a thin white t-shirt and soft pants, padded into his small room, climbed into bed, and pulled the comforter up over his chest like a man bravely surrendering to tomorrow's alarm clock. Whiskers hopped onto the bed with the silent authority of a landlord inspecting her property. She turned in 3 circles, as required by ancient cat law, then curled near his shoulders and neck, radiating warmth like a tiny, judgmental furnace with fur. "That feels good," Carlo said softly. "Fluffy and warm." He smiled into the dim room while Whiskers settled in like a queen claiming a freshly conquered pillow kingdom. "I just wish I knew exactly what you were thinking sometimes, Whiskers." Carlo and Whiskers drifted off together, both snoring peacefully in their own species-specific ways. Carlo like a tired maintenance fan, and Whiskers like a tiny engine that had swallowed a marshmallow. Somewhere far beyond the ship, beyond the planets, beyond the polite boundaries of common sense, the universe noticed Carlo Santiago's wish. And the universe smiled. Not a warm, comforting smile, not the kind of smile found on greeting cards, inspirational posters, or friendly grandmothers offering cookies. No, this was the sort of smile that had teeth in places teeth had absolutely no business being. Then, in the deep, invisible machinery of existence, something chuckled. Then it laughed. Then it laughed harder because apparently the universe had been waiting centuries for someone to make a wish this poorly worded. "Honestly," the universe said to no one in particular, "I leave free will unattended for 5 minutes and somebody orders a cat-based plot twist." An unseen entity, one that had watched humanity crawl out of caves, invent taxes, argue about sandwich shapes, and finally build starships with insufficient cup holders, leaned closer to reality. "Well," Entity 1 said, grinning so wide the expression nearly needed its own zip code, "that may be the dumbest wish I have heard in 10,000 documented civilizations." Entity 2 slowly turned its head. "I know that smile." Entity 1's grin stretched farther. "You are absolutely not thinking what I think you're thinking," Entity 2 said. "That depends," Entity 1 replied. "Are you thinking about a harmless educational experience involving one human, one cat, and an irresponsible abuse of cosmic authority?" Entity 2 pinched the bridge of what might have been its nose, assuming cosmic beings technically had noses and were not merely borrowing the concept for dramatic effect. "We are not allowed to interfere with humanity," Entity 2 said. "There are rules, very large rules, rules written in glowing letters on a moon-sized tablet. You signed next to 3 of them." "I initialed," Entity 1 said. "Legally different." "It is not legally different." "It is spiritually different," Entity 1 said. "Besides, I am not interfering. I am providing a short-term perspective adjustment with fur-related benefits." Entity 2 stared. "That is the most illegal sentence you have ever said, and last century you turned an emperor into a hat rack." "He learned posture," Entity 1 said proudly. "The big guy upstairs will notice," Entity 2 warned. "Not if I make it look like a nearby pulsar sneezed," Entity 1 said. "Very common, happens all the time, stars are dramatic." Entity 2 raised both hands in surrender. "Fine. But when reality files a complaint, I am forwarding it directly to you." "Excellent," Entity 1 said, lifting both hands toward the sleeping ship. "I love paperwork when someone else assumes I read it." Then Entity 1 threw back its head and proclaimed in a voice that made nearby atoms stand at attention, "By the questionable mercy of the universe, by the strength of collapsing stars, by the ancient power of poorly worded wishes, I grant Carlo Santiago exactly what he asked for and absolutely not what he meant." Entity 2 lowered its hands from its face. "That wording feels legally dangerous." "Perfect," Entity 1 said. "Legally dangerous is where the educational value lives." With a wicked smile, Entity 1 snapped its fingers, and a harmless flash of cosmic power rippled across the entire event horizon, slipping through walls, wires, dreams, and one very confused ventilation sensor. "It is done," Entity 1 said, laughing softly. "Carlo will regret that wish by breakfast, and Whiskers may finally learn that humans are more than furniture with food access. Entity 2 stared at the sleeping ship and muttered, "This is why the universe needs adult supervision." Chapter 3. Morning aboard the Event Horizon arrived with the delicate peacefulness of a system update nobody asked for. Carlo woke first, which was unfortunate because he woke up on top of the comforter, curled into a shape that human bones were never meant to admire. His first thought was that his bed had grown enormous. His second thought was that his pillow smelled suspiciously like himself. His third thought was that he could hear the ship's air vents gossiping from 3 rooms away. He opened his mouth to say, "What happened?" What came out was, "Mumrow!" Across the bed, Whiskers woke inside Carlo's body, sat up too fast, and immediately discovered that humans had unnecessary height, too many joints, and absolutely no tail for emotional balance. "Merp," she said, except it came out in Carlo's voice as a confused, raspy human grunt. She looked offended by her own mouth. Both of them stared at each other. Carlo, now inside Whiskers, attempted to stand proudly on 4 legs and manage something closer to a furry table collapsing during an earthquake. Whiskers, now inside Carlo, swung one human leg over the side of the bed, forgot the other one existed, and thumped onto the floor with the dignity of a dropped laundry bag. Together, wobbling, stumbling, and deeply betrayed by anatomy, they made their way toward the bathroom mirror. The mirror lit up pleasantly. "Good morning, Mr. Santiago," the AI said. "You appear to have experienced a minor biological inconvenience." Carlo looked into the mirror and saw Whiskers staring back at him. He screamed. Unfortunately, since he was currently operating Whiskers' equipment, the scream came out as a massive, room-shaking hiss that sounded like an angry tea kettle being sucked into a jet engine. Whiskers, seeing Carlo's body in the mirror and realizing she was inside it, freaked out so badly that she screamed with a human voice, a terrible, grinding sound like an ancient earth chainsaw being started by an old hillbilly lumberjack who had lost a bet with a forest. The mirror, AI. I paused for exactly half a second, which was the digital equivalent of clutching pearls. "Would either of you like me to contact medical assistance?" it asked. "Or should I play Hillbilly Wooble Rap again and pretend this is a dance routine?" Carlo tried to answer, but his new cat body betrayed him by arching its back, puffing every hair into emergency mode, and performing a sideways crab walk across the bathroom floor. "Why am I doing this?" Carlo tried to shout. What came out was a furious string of meows that sounded somehow both offended and legally binding. "I did not authorize emergency fluff mode," Carlo yowled, skittering sideways into the laundry hamper. "Why does my spine have a panic button?" Whiskers, meanwhile, lifted Carlo's human hands and stared at the fingers with pure horror. She wiggled them once, then twice. Then she gasped in Carlo's voice, "Too many toes." She tried to lick one hand clean, immediately regretted the human flavor, and made a face so dramatic the mirror briefly dimmed itself out of respect. "Ugh!" Whiskers said, sticking Carlo's tongue out in horror. "Human hands taste like soap, fear, and poor grooming decisions." Carlo attempted to point accusingly at her, forgot he had paws, and slapped the floor 3 times like he was filing an official complaint with tile. "Pointing is impossible," Carlo cried, accidentally batting at his own reflection. "How do you accuse someone with mittens?" "This is your fault," he tried to say. What Whiskers heard was, "Meow, meow, meow," which to her surprise translated perfectly in her mind as, "This is your fault." Whiskers gasped, then pointed one of Carlo's long human fingers at him like she had discovered courtroom drama. "My fault! You wish this! Giant food opening monkey!" Whiskers planted Carlo's hands on Carlo's hips, missed the hips entirely, and grabbed the t-shirt instead. "Do not blame me, because your wish-making skills are worse than your can-opening speed." Carlo froze, his ears flattened, his tail puffed again. "Wait," he meowed. "I can understand you." "You have been calling me that this whole time?" Carlo said, his whiskers twitching. "Giant food-opening monkey?" Whiskers lifted Carlo's chin with great dignity. "It is not an insult, it is your job title." Whiskers looked down at Carlo's body, then at her new hands, then at the mirror. "I can understand me too, and frankly I sound taller than expected. Carlo opened his tiny cat mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Okay, new rule. Nobody makes eye contact with the mirror until we figure out how to switch back. Whiskers immediately looked into the mirror. I am tall now. I make no promises. The mirror. I gave another polite pause. Updating medical recommendation? Panic first, paperwork later. Carlo turned just in time to see Whiskers, still wearing his body, reach behind herself with one human hand and scratch with the confused determination of someone testing unfamiliar equipment. Carlo's tiny cat eyes widened in pure horror. Hey! Stop doing that to my body! He yowled. That is not a public scratching post. That is a private citizen. Those are government-issued pajamas, Carlo cried. Oh, well, technically ship-issued. Still, there are boundaries, Whiskers. Boundaries with elastic waistbands. He spun in a tight little circle, accidentally chasing his own tail for half a second before catching himself. And why do I suddenly have the urge to knock a shampoo bottle off the counter? No. Focus, Carlo. This is a crisis, not a hobby. He pointed one trembling paw at Whiskers and missed by several inches. Also, if you're going to wear my body, stand up straight. I do not want my spine remembered by history as the slouchy one. Whiskers paused, sniffed the hand out of ancient instinct, and immediately made Carlo's face collapse into a look of historic regret. Ew! Carlo squeaked, which came out as a horrified kitten siren. Why would you smell it? Why is that a thing? Who approved cat software? Carlo gagged on principle. That is my nose you are using to insult me. Return it with an apology and maybe a mint. Whiskers gagged in Carlo's voice, staggered backward, and grabbed the sink like a ship captain surviving a meteor storm. That smells like rotten egg soup fell into a dirty air vent and declared war, she shouted. Whiskers pointed at Carlo with Carlo's own trembling hand. How do humans live like this? She demanded. You walk around all day with this nose right above your mouth like a punishment device. She shook Carlo's hand as if it had personally betrayed her. And these paws are wrong. They are long, bendy, and terrible at being paws. Why are there 5 little noodles on each one? Carlo flattened his ears. Those are fingers! They are suspicious food hooks, Whiskers snapped, and I do not trust them. She sniffed the air again, then recoiled. Also, your body smells like soap trying to hide a crime. Carlo's tail puffed. I showered last night. Whiskers narrowed Carlo's eyes at him. Then why does your left armpit smell like it made a bad decision and stood by it? The mirror AI dimmed again. For the record, I am not trained to handle this category of emergency. After an entire morning of screaming, hissing, stumbling, and one deeply regrettable armpit investigation, Carlo finally remembered the one thing worse than being trapped in a cat's body. Work, he whispered. His tiny cat pupils shrank to emergency dots. How the heck am I supposed to pull this off? He muttered under his cat breath, which came out less like a serious professional concern and more like a squeaky complaint from a haunted squeak toy. He spun toward Whiskers, who was still standing in his human body with the posture of a confused scarecrow learning taxes. Whiskers, we both have to go out today. I have work, which means you need to put on my human clothes. My science uniform is in my personal drawer. Whiskers snapped her borrowed human head toward him. How am I supposed to do that? I almost poked out my cat eye. Your eye. Why are eyes so easy to poke? Terrible design. Carefully, Carlo said, though his voice cracked into a tiny meow halfway through. I'll guide you, one sleeve at a time, no licking, no panic chewing, and absolutely no using my pants as a tunnel. Whiskers stared at him with Carlo's exhausted human face. You humans wear too many removable skins. And cats commit too many furniture crimes, Carlo shot back. Move. So, still emotionally recovering from the bathroom disaster, they marched back to the bedroom, one nervous cat with a job schedule and one giant human-shaped cat preparing to lose a fight against a shirt. Chapter 4. Carlo strolled into the bedroom first and immediately noticed something deeply unfair about Whiskers' body. Every tiny cat step looked like it had been approved by royalty, physics, and at least 3 smug ancestors. "So, this is how I walk," he muttered, watching his borrowed paws glide across the floor. "Like I own the entire universe, and everyone else is just renting space in it?" Beside him, Whiskers shuffled along in Carlo's human body, staring at her own cat body with growing suspicion. "So, that is what I look like from the outside?" she murmured, watching Carlo's tail swish with accidental arrogance. "No wonder humans obey me. I appear to have the posture of a tiny emperor with a live-in servant." Their faces made the moment worse. Carlo's cat face looked impossibly smug by accident, with narrowed eyes and a tiny mouth that seemed to say, "I have investments in planets you have never heard of." Whiskers, trapped in Carlo's human face, looked like someone had installed confusion behind his eyes and forgotten to include the instruction manual. Carlo narrowed Whiskers' eyes even more, which somehow made him look like a retired space admiral judging a buffet. "Why does my face keep doing this?" he whispered. "I am not trying to look superior. My eyebrows are just unemployed." Whiskers blinked Carlo's human eyes one at a time badly. "Your face is difficult," she said. "It has too many controls and none of them come with whiskers." "Stop blinking like that," Carlo said. "You look like my brain cells is buffering." Whiskers tried to frown, but Carlo's mouth formed a tragic sideways squiggle instead. "Is this fear?" she asked. "Or hunger? Humans make the same face for both." Inside Whiskers' body, Carlo watched his own human face twist through Whiskers' failed attempt at expression and felt a deep, silent laugh rumble through his mind. "I never knew I was a natural comedian," he thought, delighted and horrified. All this time my face had talent, and I was wasting it on normal emotions. "Look at me," Carlo thought, as Whiskers' version of his face blinked again in 2 separate time zones. "I have spent years trying to appear calm, intelligent, and professionally dependable, and apparently all my face needed was one cat in charge to become dinner theater." He tried very hard not to laugh out loud, mostly because laughing in a cat body seemed dangerous. For all he knew, one wrong chuckle could turn into a hairball, a sneeze, or a sound that summoned every maintenance drone on the ship. "This is educational," Carlo told himself. "Horrifying, yes. Deeply insulting, absolutely. But educational. I am learning that my face has at least 17 emergency settings, and Whiskers has discovered every single one using only confusion and poor posture." Then Whiskers made Carlo's eyebrows rise so high they looked like they were trying to evacuate his forehead. Carlo's inner laughter almost broke loose. "No. Stay focused. You have work. You are a scientist. You are a respectable adult currently trapped inside a smug loaf with legs." "All right, Whiskers," Carlo said, forcing his tiny cat voice into what he hoped was a professional tone and not the sound of a squeaky toy filing taxes. "Dress up. I need to get to work and review the survey documents. Command wants to know if that newly discovered planet is suitable for humans, Earth animals, and apparently whatever category you personally fall under." While Carlo was speaking, Whiskers had already begun wrestling with his uniform. She had one sleeve wrapped around Carlo's head, the shirt collar hooked under his chin, and the expression of a warrior betrayed by laundry. Then she found the pants. Whiskers held them up with Carlo's human hands, squinted at the 2 dangling legs, and spoke in Carlo's voice with deep moral outrage. "How in the hell do you humans put on this thing you call pants? Why does it have 2 tunnels and no dignity?" Carlo turned around just in time to witness Whiskers attempting to dress his body by jamming both of his human arms through the pant legs. The waistband was stretched across his shoulders like a defeated scarf, and Carlo's right and left hands poked out where his legs were absolutely supposed to go. For one breathless second, Carlo could only stare. "Whiskers," he said slowly, ears flattening. "Are you trying to get dressed? Or are you telling me to get my own head out of my own ass?" Whiskers looked down at Carlo's arm sticking out of the pants, then back at him with wounded pride. "Do not mock me, tiny furniture ruler. Your clothing is a trap designed by cowards." "Those are pants," Carlo said. "They go on legs." Whiskers lifted both trapped arms as if presenting evidence in court. "Then why did they accept my paws?" Because pants are overachievers, Carlo said. They see any limb and assume it belongs inside them. Whiskers narrowed Carlo's human eyes. Then your pants are fools, and I respect them slightly more. After several minutes of strategic tugging, frantic meowing, and one argument over whether socks were foot prisons or sleeve failures, Carlo finally managed to help Whiskers get dressed. Together, they headed for the door. Carlo in Whiskers' cat body, and Whiskers in Carlo's human body, wearing the science uniform with the stiff dignity of someone who had personally been insulted by fabric. Whiskers marched confidently toward the ship's door, forgot that humans were not automatically recognized as royalty by architecture, and walked face first into it. Thunk! She staggered back, clutching Carlo's borrowed nose. Ow! Damn it, the door didn't open! She hissed in a human voice that somehow still managed to sound like an offended cat in a cardboard box. Doors do not make decisions, Carlo said. They follow instructions. Whiskers rubbed Carlo's nose and glared at the door. Then this one followed them with violence. Carlo stared up at her from the floor. You're supposed to put your palm on the digital panel. Whiskers glared at the panel as if it had challenged her bloodline, slapped Carlo's hand onto it, and the door slid open with a soft, polite whisper. See? Carlo said. Gentle technology. It assaulted me first, Whiskers muttered. They stepped into the corridor. Carlo tried to guide Whiskers with calm instructions, but his own human body betrayed him with years of habit. Without thinking, Whiskers scooped Carlo's cat body into her arms and carried him gently against her chest, exactly the way Carlo always carried Whiskers. Carlo froze in her arms. This is disturbingly comfortable, he admitted. I hate that my body knows how to hold me. For the record, Carlo said, muffled against his own uniform, if anyone sees you carrying me like a purse, I am blaming a medical experiment. You are warm, small, and portable, Whiskers said. This is not a purse. This is strategy. The fast transit station was still a long walk away. The event horizon was 4.5 miles of corridors, lifts, labs, storage decks, and scientific optimism welded together into one enormous metal problem. Halfway there, Whiskers stopped so suddenly Carlo's whiskers nearly folded backward. She lifted Carlo's human nose into the air and inhaled with the reverence of a priest discovering bacon. I smell food, Whiskers whispered. Then her eyes widened. Glorious food! We are scientists, Carlo said. We do not abandon duty because a cafeteria smells heroic. Whiskers looked down at him. You say that, but your stomach just testified against you. Nope. No, absolutely not, Carlo said at once. We do not have time for side quests with gravy. His stomach growled. Unfortunately, it growled from Whiskers' cat body, producing a tiny, tragic rumble that sounded like a haunted coin purse. Carlo lowered his ears. Fine. We have 20 minutes before I start work. I'll tell you how to order. We eat fast, we leave fast, nobody climbs on the table, and nobody challenges the utensils. No pawing at the menu screen, Carlo warned. Use one finger. Whiskers held up Carlo's entire hand. Which one is the responsible finger? At this point, Carlo said, whichever finger does not order 6 desserts. I want a huge, fully cooked salmon, Whiskers commanded in Carlo's human voice. And I'll get steak with smashed potatoes and gravy, Carlo said, trying to sound like a responsible adult and not a cat being emotionally blackmailed by lunch. They found a table near the exit and sat down with the stiff, careful posture of 2 creatures pretending they understood civilization. When the food arrived, the server placed the salmon in front of the cat and the steak in front of the human. Both of them stared. Carlo, inside a cat body, smelled the salmon and felt every instinct in Whiskers' brain stand up and salute. Whiskers, inside a human body, smelled the steak and potatoes with Carlo's nose and looked personally offended by how good cooked cow could be. For 3 noble seconds they behaved, Carlo whispered. Remember, small bites. Whiskers whispered back, define small. Anything smaller than your face. Whiskers considered this generous boundary. Then I admire your reasonable leadership. Then civilization lost the vote. Carlo attacked the salmon with the savage focus of a tiny fur-covered warlord. Whiskers tore into the steak and smashed potatoes with Carlo's human hands, using the fork only long enough to prove she disagreed with it. Carlo tried to use polite little bites for exactly half a second, then Whiskers' cat instincts took the wheel, threw the steering wheel out an airlock, and buried his entire face in the salmon. He came up with fish on his whiskers, fish on his nose, and the wild-eyed expression of someone who had just discovered religion inside a lunch tray. "Carlo," Whiskers barked through a mouthful of steak, "you are eating like an animal." Carlo lifted his salmon-covered cat face. "I am literally an animal right now. What is your excuse?" Whiskers looked down and realized she had one hand in the mashed potatoes, one elbow in the gravy, and Carlo's mouth full enough to qualify as cargo storage. "I am conducting research," she said solemnly. "Human food requires aggressive investigation." She attempted to use a napkin, misunderstood its purpose, and dabbed the table, the plate, Carlo's sleeve, and finally the side of her own borrowed face as if polishing a window. "This square cloth is terrible at catching prey." "It's for wiping your mouth," Carlo snapped, then immediately dragged his cat tongue across his own nose and froze. "Ignore that. I am under neurological occupation." Whiskers grabbed the steak with both hands, raised it like a sacred offering, and took a bite so dramatic that gravy splashed onto the menu screen, which politely asked if they wanted to add a side of shame. Carlo tried to regain control by sitting upright, but Whiskers' tail betrayed him, swishing through the salmon sauce and painting a small arc across the table. "My rear end has become a brush," he said in horror. "Then make art," Whiskers said, already licking gravy from Carlo's thumb before remembering it was not technically her thumb. "Oh, that is a strange toe." "Stop licking my hand in public," Carlo hissed. "Then stop making it taste like victory," Whiskers replied. A passing service drone hovered near their table, scanned the battlefield of fish, potatoes, gravy, and emotional damage, then slowly reversed away without offering assistance. "Even the robot is judging us," Carlo said. Whiskers swallowed, sat straighter, and tried to look dignified. A single cube of potato slid from her chin onto the table with a soft, defeated plop. "Let them judge," she said. "History will remember us as pioneers." "History is going to remember us as a sanitation incident," Carlo said. Gravy flew, fish flakes scattered, manners fled the cafeteria, changed their names, and applied for asylum on another deck. The neighboring tables went silent. One crew member lowered their spoon in horror. Another whispered, "Is that a medical emergency or breakfast?" At the next table, an adult calmly covered a child's eyes, not because the sight was dangerous, but because no young mind should witness the worst table manners ever recorded in known space. Chapter 5. By the time Carlo and Whiskers reached the fast transit station, they had achieved what could generously be called publicly acceptable movement. Carlo, still trapped in Whiskers' body, trotted along with the offended dignity of a cat who had been forced to commute. Whiskers, still piloting Carlo's body, walked beside him with the stiff confidence of someone pretending not to be one bad step away from discovering stairs emotionally. The transit doors sighed open, and Whiskers stepped aboard first, immediately grabbing a handrail with both hands like it was prey. Carlo hopped in after her and looked up. "Remember," he whispered in his tiny cat voice, "as a human, you need to behave as a human as possible." Whiskers turned Carlo's face toward him and narrowed his eyes. "Define behave," Carlo sighed. "It means don't be a jerk, don't act like a tyrant, and absolutely do not hiss at anyone from my mouth." Whiskers chuckled in Carlo's voice, which made the sound come out unsettlingly smooth and villainous. "Your species has many rules for being boring." "First lesson," Carlo whispered as the transit lurched forward. "Humans do not stare directly at strangers while slowly sniffing the air." Whiskers withdrew Carlo's nose from the nearby passenger's lunch bag. "Then how do humans identify delicious enemies?" "We call that being rude," Carlo said. "Your language has no useful words," Whiskers replied. "Everything fun is rude." Carlo climbed onto the seat beside her and tried to look casual, which was difficult because cats always looked either asleep, suspicious, or prepared to commit financial crimes. "Also, keep your hands still." Whiskers raised both of Carlo's hands and examined them. These are not hands. These are five-bladed negotiation tools. They are fingers. Then why do they want to steal that man's sandwich? Because you want to steal that man's sandwich, Whiskers nodded thoughtfully. So, the fingers are honest. The ride to Carlo's work was mercifully short, though not short enough to stop Whiskers from pressing every transit window with Carlo's nose and muttering, "The world moves too fast for a creature with no tail." When they arrived, Carlo guided her toward his cubicle workstation, a bland little fortress of screens, files, and half-finished coffee cups. To Carlo, it looked like professional responsibility. To Whiskers, it looked like a cardboard box that had gone to college. At the cubicle entrance, Carlo hopped onto a low storage bin and pointed one paw at the workstation. "That screen is mine. That chair is mine. That coffee is mine. Do not drink the coffee." Whiskers looked wounded. "Why not?" "Because you once licked floor cleaner and called it spicy water." "It had courage," Whiskers said. "Your coffee smells like burnt thunder. I wish to meet it." Before they reached the cubicle, one of Carlo's colleagues spotted them and marched over with the grin of a man who had just found fresh gossip wandering on four paws. "Carlo," he said, glancing down at the cat. "I had no idea it was show and tell month." Carlo's ears flattened. In his current body, this made him look less intimidating and more like an angry throw pillow. He tugged at Whiskers' pant leg with one paw. "Say this exactly," he whispered. "I work better with a partner who isn't human." He paused, then added urgently, "And make it sound normal, not like you're announcing the beginning of a dictatorship." "And whatever you do," Carlo whispered, "do not mention the body switch." Whiskers bent down until Carlo's own human face hovered inches above his cat face. "Should I mention the magical cosmic crime?" "No." "The stolen bones?" "No." "The fact that my tail is missing and I feel emotionally unfinished? Especially no." Whiskers straightened with tragic dignity. "Fine. I shall suffer silently, like a noble creature with terrible posture." Whiskers stared down at him, offended by the assignment, then turned back to the colleague and said in Carlo's voice, too quickly and with far too much pride, "I work better with a partner who isn't human." Carlo gave her a quick, approving nod. "Good. That was almost normal." Whiskers smiled with Carlo's mouth showing too many teeth for too long. "Was that friendly?" Carlo's fur stood up. "That was how a vending machine would smile before stealing someone's identity." "Humans are impossible," Whiskers muttered. "Cats simply blink slowly and let everyone assume wisdom." The colleague blinked. Carlo gave an innocent little meow, which he hoped sounded like perfectly ordinary office cat, and not, "Please do not investigate our disastrous body switch." Whiskers stood there in Carlo's body, shoulders squared, chin lifted, radiating the powerful energy of a manager preparing to conquer a keyboard. Carlo swallowed. This was going to be the longest workday in scientific history. Carlo spent the rest of the workday perched beside his own keyboard like a furry little supervisor with no salary and too many opinions. From inside Whiskers' body, he guided Whiskers through the planet survey files, the deep scan sensor readings, and several screens of scientific data that made her borrowed human eyes glaze over like someone had polished them with boredom. "Tap that icon," Carlo whispered. "No. The other one. The one shaped like a planet." Whiskers squinted at the display. "They are all planets, Carlo. Your job is just glowing circles wearing tiny labels." By the time the workday was almost over, Whiskers had developed a deep personal grudge against humanity, office chairs, and the concept of passwords. She slumped in Carlo's chair, using Carlo's face to express the exhausted tragedy of a cat forced to perform clerical labor. "I miss my cat body," she complained. "Being human is too complicated, too many buttons, too much walking upright, and your elbows keep trying to escape in different directions. When we go home, we must figure out how to get our bodies back." Carlo nodded from the desk where he had accidentally sat on 3 important documents because cats considered paperwork to be a warm suggestion. "I definitely agree with you, Whiskers," he said in her cat voice. "After this review, we should head home and figure out this whole miserable mess." He flicked his tail, then frowned. Also, I would like my thumbs back. I never appreciated thumbs properly. I owe them an apology. Whiskers turned Carlo's head toward him and narrowed his human eyes. This mess is not my fault, you dumb monkey. Carlo opened his mouth to object, but Whiskers raised one borrowed finger with the authority of a tiny queen trapped in a laboratory employee. Last I remember, before we went to bed, you made the stupid wish. Carlo's ears folded so flat they nearly disappeared. Yes, he admitted, and I deeply regret it. I miss my human body, too. He glanced at Whiskers, using his face to chew the end of a stylus, especially when I see what you're doing with it. Your face was bored, Whiskers said. I gave it activity. You gave it dental risk, Carlo snapped. Big jerk. At last, the review was finished. Carlo saved the survey notes, double-checked that Whiskers had not renamed any files Food Moon, Suspicious Rock, or Planet That Looks Pushable, and hurried them back toward the fast transit. Whiskers walked beside him, muttering, When I return to my body, I am sleeping for 16 hours and suing your skeleton. Once they reached Carlo's quarters, they fell into the same old routine, except now the routine required instruction manuals, emotional support, and Carlo yelling, Not that burner, from the counter. Carlo, still in Whiskers' cat body, helped guide Whiskers through making dinner by pointing with one paw and trying not to fall into the sink. Whiskers stared at the ingredients with Carlo's tired human face. Why are there so many steps before eating? She demanded. Cats have improved the process. Step 1, find food. Step 2, eat food. Step 3, judge the empty bowl. Humans cook, Carlo said. It makes food safer, tastier, and less likely to fight back. Whiskers poked a vegetable with Carlo's finger. This one is already defeated. Why are we still negotiating with it? Carlo sighed. Because that is not negotiation, that is chopping. Whiskers picked up the knife, immediately held it like a royal scepter, and announced, I accept this sharp spoon as my weapon. Carlo's fur puffed in alarm. Put down the sharp spoon before my insurance becomes a murder mystery. Whiskers lowered the knife with visible disappointment. Fine. No sharp spoon. What about the hot circle? She pointed at the burner. Can I threaten the food with that? Carlo leapt onto the counter and instantly regretted it when his borrowed paws skidded across a dusting of flour. We do not threaten dinner. We cook dinner. Whiskers frowned. That sounds like threatening with extra steps. She opened the spice drawer, sniffed every container, and recoiled from one so hard Carlo's body nearly fell backward. This dust is angry. That's pepper, Carlo said. Use a little. Whiskers pinched a mountain of it between Carlo's fingers. How much is a little in monkey measurements? Less than a sneeze. She stared at the pile. Too late. I have summoned weather. The pepper hit the pan, and both of them sneezed. Carlo's cat sneeze came out as a tiny, offended squeak. Whiskers' human sneeze sounded like Carlo had swallowed a trumpet and lost a fight with it. The stove display flashed. Air quality concern detected. Carlo wiped his whiskers with one paw. Great. Even the stove thinks we're failing. Whiskers sniffed. The stove is weak. It fears flavor. Next came the pasta. Whiskers dropped it into the pot one strand at a time, watching each piece sink with grave suspicion. Carlo, she whispered, the noodles are drowning. They're boiling. That is drowning with bubbles. She grabbed the spoon and began stirring like she was rescuing survivors from a whirlpool. Hold on, tiny ropes. I, Whiskers, have opposable thumbs and poor training. Carlo tried to taste the sauce by dipping one paw in, forgot paws were not designed for kitchen etiquette, and yelped when the sauce clung to his fur. Hot! Hot! My foot is Italian! Whiskers looked delighted. Does this improve you? No, it marinates me. She leaned closer. If you become dinner, do I still get my body back? Carlo glared. Ask that again and I'm feeding you plain lettuce. When the food was finally ready, Whiskers insisted on plating it the cat way, which apparently meant placing everything in a proud heap and patting the top once for dominance. Carlo stared at the plate. That is not presentation. That is a landslide with garnish. Whiskers folded Carlo's arms across Carlo's chest. Food should know who is in charge before it enters the mouth. They sat down to eat, and for almost 5 seconds, dinner appeared survivable. Then Whiskers tried to cut a noodle with a fork, failed, and accused it of cowardice. Carlo tried to lap water from a glass, tipped it over with his whiskers, and watched it spread across the table like a tiny indoor lake. Whiskers pointed at the mess. Your cat body is also bad at being human. Carlo narrowed his eyes. Your human body is currently losing a duel to spaghetti. Chapter 6. By the time the day finally finished sprinting past them like it had stolen a wallet and heard police sirens, Carlo and Whiskers were exhausted, sticky, sauce-flecked, and held together by caffeine, trauma, and one suspicious noodle stuck to Carlo's former eyebrow. Unfortunately, bedtime still had one final boss battle waiting for them. Hygiene. Carlo, still trapped in Whiskers' cat body, sat on the bathroom counter like a furry emergency instructor who had taken one online course titled, So Your Cat is Wearing Your Body. Okay, he meowed with desperate authority. First rule of cleaning a human body. Water stays outside. If water goes inside, that is either drinking, drowning, or soup. We are aiming for none of those. Whiskers, standing in Carlo's human body, stared at the shower like it was a vertical execution cloud. You expect me to willingly stand beneath ceiling rain? She demanded. Humans are either brave, permanently confused, or secretly trying to turn themselves into soup. All three, Carlo said. Then, without thinking, he lifted one cat paw and began grooming his shoulder with Whiskers' rough little tongue. He froze mid-lick, one leg in the air, eyes wide with horror. Nope. Absolutely not. I have got to stop doing that. I am one stressful evening away from licking my tax documents and burying my savings under the couch. Inside the shower, Whiskers turned the water on too hard and screamed in Carlo's voice with the full sincerity of someone being personally attacked by weather. She spun once, slipped twice, grabbed the curtain like it owed her money, and flailed like a scarecrow being pressure-washed for crimes against agriculture. By the universe! She shouted over the spray. How do you humans clean yourselves without drowning in the rain god's tears of miserable joy? Lower the pressure, Carlo yowled. Also, stop trying to bite the shampoo bottle. It is not prey, it is lavender-scented betrayal in a plastic prison. Whiskers glared through the water. Then why does it smell like something I should defeat? Because humans invented products that smell like flowers to trick us into paying for soap, Carlo said. Civilization is mostly scams with labels. Whiskers eventually emerged clean damp, steaming slightly and deeply offended by the entire concept of towels. She held one at arm's length, like it was a dead jellyfish. Carlo guided her through drying off, brushing teeth, and getting dressed without putting the shirt on backward, inside out, upside down, or on one leg as a ceremonial banner of surrender. The toothbrush was nearly another disaster. Whiskers held it like a tiny spear, jabbed it toward Carlo's mouth, and asked, Do humans attack their teeth nightly to keep them loyal? Carlo blinked. Basically, yes. A few minutes later, the bathroom mirror lit up. Music, anyone? The AI asked, sounding far too cheerful for a machine that had just witnessed a shower, a towel duel, and one toothbrush hostage situation. Yes, please, Carlo said automatically in a cat voice. The AI waited politely. I'm sorry. I do not currently recognize dramatic feline opera, wet gremlin noises, or bathroom-based screaming as authorized command languages. Whiskers sighed, using Carlo's tired human face to its full theatrical potential. Yes, please, she repeated. Thank you, Mr. Santiago, the AI said, which Carlo found personally insulting since he was clearly the one covered in fur, shaped like a loaf, and standing on the counter with sauce, still somewhere behind one ear. A sleepy old earth tune began to play, soft enough to make the room feel almost normal, if normal included one man-shaped cat, one cat-shaped man, and a mirror quietly updating its incident report. At last, Whiskers climbed into Carlo's bed inside Carlo's body and collapsed with the heavy satisfaction of a creature who had survived pants, work, cooking, office chairs, indoor rain, weaponized soap, and the horrifying discovery that humans voluntarily brush bones inside their faces. Carlo, in Whisker's body, crawled up beside his own shoulder and neck, curled into the familiar warm spot, and tried not to think about how weirdly comforting it was to snuggle against himself. "Tomorrow," Carlo murmured in a tiny exhausted meow, "we figure out how to fix this." Whiskers gave a sleepy human grunt. "Tomorrow, I am suing the shower, arresting the towel, and interrogating the shampoo." And with that, both of them fell into a deep, uncertain sleep, not knowing what the next morning would bring. Only that, whatever it was, it probably involved more screaming, more poor decisions, and at least one appliance quietly deciding it deserved hazard pay. Somewhere beyond space and time, past stars, planets, common sense, warranty coverage, and any place a physical eyeball could legally or emotionally survive, Entity One smiled with wicked satisfaction. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made comets fake appointments and take the long way around. "You see," Entity One said, folding its impossible arms with the smug confidence of someone who had definitely skimmed the cosmic rulebook and underlined none of it. "Everything turned out just fine. Lesson learned: never make a lazy wish involving a cat unless you want the universe to grab popcorn, dim the lights, and file the whole disaster under educational slapstick." Entity Two stared at Entity One for a very long moment. In mortal terms, it was probably 3 seconds. In eternal being terms, it was enough time for 7 galaxies to feel awkward. "That," Entity Two said at last, "was the dumbest lesson plan I have witnessed in eons, and I once watched a civilization teach fire safety by handing toddlers fireworks and calling it hands-on learning." Entity One lifted a glowing finger. "But did Carlo learn?" Carlo learned that showers are murder clouds, pants are leg prisons with ambition, office chairs are judgmental traps, and his cat has been calling him a food-opening monkey with inconsistent service standards. Entity Two snapped. "That is not character growth. That is trauma with whiskers, a meal plan, and a towel lawsuit." Entity One waved this away. "Details, educational details. The best lessons always involve confusion, mild screaming, and at least one appliance reconsidering its career." "Be glad the big guy upstairs did not notice," Entity Two said, lowering its voice as if the ceiling of existence might be wearing headphones. "If he finds out we used unauthorized body swapping as a teaching tool, we will both be cleaning black holes with toothbrushes, alphabetizing asteroid belts, and apologizing personally to every confused ventilation sensor on that ship." Entity One tilted its head. "But did he notice?" Entity Two opened its mouth, closed it, opened it again, then pointed accusingly with enough force to make 3 dimensions flinch. "I hate when your bad arguments have convenient timing. It makes irresponsibility look like strategy, and you are already unbearable enough with cheekbones." "Exactly," Entity One said. "Now, by morning, everything goes back to normal. Carlo gets his body. Whiskers gets her body. The ship gets one less hygiene emergency, the shower survives litigation, and the towel is released on good behavior. Everyone wins." "And their ability to understand each other?" Entity Two asked. Entity One's wicked smile returned, freshly sharpened and probably not safety approved. "Gone. Completely erased. No evidence, no cosmic fingerprints. No mysterious cat-to-human translation, no awkward breakfast where Carlo realizes Whiskers has been ranking his can-opening speed as tragically slow but emotionally reliable." Entity Two squinted. "That seems cruel." "Not cruel," Entity One said. "Poetic. Besides, Carlo already has a natural talent for guessing what Whiskers wants. Food, warmth, attention, revenge, treats, more food, suspiciously specific revenge, or whatever object is most inconvenient, fragile, expensive, or emotionally meaningful to knock off a table. He will manage." Entity Two sighed so deeply several nebulae briefly rearranged themselves into the shape of a disappointed face. "One day," it muttered, "your definition of lesson is going to get us demoted to cloud supervision, thunder maintenance, or worse, motivational poster department." Entity 1 only smiled wider and looked down toward the sleeping Carlo Santiago and his cat. Maybe, it said, but admit it, this was funnier than paperwork, safer than turning another emperor into furniture, and cheaper than therapy. Entity 2 did not answer right away. Then, very quietly, it said, "Fine. But if the cat ever makes a wish, I am going on vacation, changing my name, and forwarding all prayers directly to customer service." The very next morning, Carlo Santiago woke with the strange, suspicious feeling that his bones had finally returned their rental equipment. He sat up, touched his face, wiggled his fingers, checked that his elbows were where elbows were legally supposed to be, and bolted to the restroom, like a man late for an appointment with destiny and a bathroom mirror. The mirror lit up just in time to witness Carlo stare at his own human reflection and scream, "By the universe, thank you very much! I'm back to my old self again!" A second later, Whiskers padded in, tail high, whiskers forward, and the full smug dignity of a cat who had successfully survived being trapped in a tall, shower-dependent monkey suit. She meowed, and in her own triumphant little thoughts declared, "By the ancient law of cats, I am a cat again." Carlo looked down. Whiskers looked up. For one impossible second, they stared at each other as if waiting for the old magic to return, as if either of them might hear the other's voice again. But the room stayed quiet. No translations, no insults about food-opening monkeys, no complaints about suspicious finger noddles. Just Carlo, Whiskers, and the soft ache of a miracle already fading. Whiskers recovered first because cats believed emotions were best handled after breakfast. She marched to the kitchen table, lifted one paw, and pointed regally at her empty bowl. Carlo wiped at his eyes, laughed under his breath, and said, "Now that we can no longer understand each other, I can safely assume I still know exactly what you want." He filled her bowl, and as Whiskers began to eat, Carlo rested a gentle hand on her back, grateful and heartbroken all at once, because even without words, some friendships still knew how to speak.